When you set up a shot, it's important to light it well and set the camera to appropriate settings to capture the light level accurately. On the rear of the camera, you'll find the auto lock selector. This determines whether or not the camera decides its light levels automatically, or whether you do. With the selector in auto lock position, the camera will automatically adjust the iris, gain, shutter speed and white balance. As you can see, with rapid and contrasting light changes, the camera is thrown into a disorientated frenzy. The PD170 doesn't make the wisest choices on its own, so we'd better set this to manual control. We do this by moving the selector to the middle position. The final position hold is simply to store our settings so they can no longer be modified. As we're going to be changing iris, gain, shutter and white balance, I'm going to leave hold off for now. Here we have a shot that is a little bright, so we need to take steps to control this. The first tool we have is the ND or neutral density filters. ND filters are located on the front left-hand side of the camera, and we have the choice of using none, 1 or 2. As these little filters move in front of the lens, they reduce the amount of light that can pass through, darkening our image. The effect is dramatic, but a little crude. It would be nice to have something that could step down our light levels gradually, rather than in such large chunks. And that's where iris comes in. Imagine iris a little like the iris at the start of James Bond, where he shoots down the lens. The bigger the hole that opens up, the more light can get into the camera, and the brighter the image. The iris controls are on the left of the camera, just next to the ND filters. Press the iris button and you will see the F number appear in the head-up display. We can then use the iris to increase or decrease the light coming in. The higher the number, the smaller the hole that lets light in, until finally, no more light comes in. Using a combination of the ND filters and iris, you should be able to control brighter environments. But what if it's too dark? Well, you should always check your ND filters are off and your iris is wide first. But some venues, theatre environments or other low light places, are simply too dark to get a good result without help. This is where gain comes in. Just as we can amplify a mic signal if the sound is quiet, we can artificially turn up the brightness of an image using gain. The gain control is located on the rear of the camera at the top left. As we click in the button labelled gain, we can see 0 dB appearing in the viewfinder. This tells us that no gain is yet applied. Below gain, and near the bottom of the camera, we have a selection wheel which we can turn to raise this. As we push it all the way to plus 18 dB, the image becomes much brighter. But be wary, this also raises up all the ambient static present and makes the image fuzzier and CCTV-like. Gain is a last resort if you can't control the environment you're in. It is far easier to light something right and adapt to that instead. There is another button that also has an effect on brightness that you may well have seen utilised in photography. Some adverts or photographs feature images with blurred lighting where the subject stays still and a light source moves around them. This is done by altering the shutter speed. Shutter speed controls how long the image is exposed to light for. The shutter control is just underneath the gain control on the rear of the camera. As I press in the button, we see the shutter speed highlight on screen. At the moment, it is set to 50, but if I roll this back to 10,000, you can see the image become a lot darker. This is because the camera is now only letting light in for a 10,000th of a second every frame, rather than a 50th as before. Here we have the shutter speed set to a longer exposure, a 12th of a second. The image looks quite bright and clear, but falls down when objects move on screen. Simply moving my hand across the image results in juddery, awful-looking footage. Setting the shutter to 25 matches the frame rate, but not the number of fields present, so we have footage that looks a little blurry. Realistically, we almost always want to set the shutter speed to 50, as it's double the frame rate and therefore equals the fields in the interlaced footage. We won't cover that in depth, but rest assured that 50 is as bright as you can get the image without any blurring of the on-screen motion. We've now covered how to set the camera up in different lighting environments. What we haven't discussed is how to be certain that the image on screen is neither underexposed and grainy or overexposed and washed out. If we open up the viewfinder on the left-hand side of the camera, we find a collection of menu buttons. Near the bottom, you'll find the zebra selector, And what that does is give us some helpful reference levels so we know our shot is set right. There are 3 zebra states: off, 70 and 100. Setting the zebra at 70 will display diagonal stripes on screen where we see skin if we have set up our camera correctly. Obviously this varies a little depending on skin colour and tone, but it gives a good approximation. When we look through the viewfinder, we can indeed see zebra stripes on our subject. However, this is far too many. What you're looking for is just a smattering on the nose and forehead. As we're close, I simply roll the iris slightly more closed until the zebra stripes look right. With the zebra set to 100, we will see stripes in the image on whatever is set at 100 IRE, or close to full exposure. Wherever we see diagonal lines is going to come out as white in the final image. You should see a little in ceiling lights, through windows, or on clouds, and that's okay. Your image just shouldn't be dominated by zebra, otherwise it will be overexposed. Don't worry about leaving zebra on as a reference when you're shooting. It will only appear in the viewfinder and does not record to tape. If you find yourself getting into a terrible state setting up your light levels, or get confused, you will find a camera reset button under the viewfinder. Simply lightly push a pen tip inside and the camera will beep and return to factory settings. We've gone through a lot in this chapter and you may find some of the new terms and techniques a little daunting. I recommend watching again and booking out a camera to have a go yourself. Just remember the essential checklist. Make sure auto lock is on manual. Check that the shutter is on 50. Set the ND filters and iris. Set gain only if necessary. Reference the light levels in your shot using zebra, 70 for faces, 100 for full exposure. White balance your shot. And remember, if all else fails, hit reset.